Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 8 of The Captain's Heart. Jalgiran looked out onto the dock area. Visible surfaces were all the same gray of what had to be the protective coating. When this... Okay, I am going to add some stuff here. Let's... Okay, so let's go with that. The protective coating. Crates that had been confirmed to be empty by the hunters it sent out when they docked peppered the floor. It's going to be here. Peppered the floor, indicating it was active, if not currently so. When the station commander had said they'd find his ship a berth, this was not what he'd expected. As he contemplated how much of a fuss he wanted to raise, one of the few of his crew to have taken advantage of being a dock to leave the ship returned. There's no way out, she told him, puzzled. Captain. Captain, are all Earther stations like this? I don't know. The Earthers weren't required to give them access to the station, even once they joined the Federation. Only trade stations had to allow access to anyone docked. Other stations had individual rules about what part of a station was open to those visiting, even if it was only the dock sides. I'm going to make that singular. Although, on those stations, the docks were filled with stores and activities for visitors. This snarled at him of leave. So, how aggressive did he want to be after 3 days of such treatment? He expected the commander would contact him again for an update on the repairs. With Alex still unconscious, it would be the same as it had been yesterday. Alpha, the hunter on duty, said as he turned to leave, "What are the instructions if Earthers approach?" "Report any Earther you see to your beta. Be gentle with any who try to step on the ship, but keep them out. If they prove difficult." Gralgaran couldn't imagine one of them would, but it was a hunter's duty to consider trouble. Have comms contact the station so they can send someone to retrieve them. This is Earther territory. We should let them handle their troublemakers. Understood, Alpha. Anywhere else, he thought as he walked away, he wouldn't stand for being treated this way. He had done nothing for his ship to deserve being relegated to a carrion of a berth. If not for his mission, he would probably demand an explanation from the commander. He couldn't believe the animosity he'd heard in the Earther's tone was representative of his species. His people wouldn't be supporting their entry in the Federation if they were so speciesist. But as much as access to the station would help his mission, and any demand he made could be made with demands from the commander. If the Earther demanded for his people to be allowed on the ship, would he have ground to refuse? An exchange of personnel was not an unreasonable demand. This was, after all, Nothing but a merchant ship. Patrick Herr Gersbill, he said, and waited for the acknowledgement of the call. Alpha, the male answered. Meet me on the bridge with your team. It's time to consider strategies. As he stepped onto the bridge, the changeover was underway. Only comms needed to be occupied while at dock, but no one wanted to be alone for the 7-hour shift. So other bridge crew would sit at their station and keep their friend company. That 8 people were now taking over for the 3 that had been there would be considered odd on an actual merchant ship. Even if they couldn't leave, there was plenty for his crew to do on the promenade. Downtime was always used among his crew. But while it was a secret to anyone outside of the ship and not something openly discussed with the civilians, the crew knew they were on a hunter ship. Alpha, Batrix greeted him, stepping away from the center of the bridge to take a seat at censor. All right, Gralgaran said once the last of the bridge left. The situation is that we will not be allowed on the station unless I push the issue, which allows the commander to push back. The mission still needs to be carried through, so I need alternatives. Active sensors are off the board, Patrick stated. This is a military station as well as a research one. Even if they aren't hiding how much antimatter they have, they are going to keep their nose to the wind for anyone scanning them. There's also no telling how well shielded their stock's going to be. The hunter seated at secondary sensor board said, the Earthers' tech might be below us on the whole, but they're bound to have hidden claws. Every species does. Monitoring their comms might give us something, the female seated at comms said. That means we need to bring on others. The copper-furred male that in the pilot seat said, you're the only one who's learned the language, and you need 6 days to become fluent. Are there other hunters who have learned Earther? Gralgaran asked. I was the only one when Leah taught me, she said. I'm checking with the other betas, Batrix said. Can the counselor take a shift? The male at the ship support station asked. She isn't a hunter, Gralgaran replied. But she knows why we're here, the male said. And this is and this isn't you sending us into battle, Alpha. It's just sitting here listening to Earther talk. He nodded. He didn't like it, but if he couldn't find 3 hunters who'd learned Earther, he'd have to run the idea by her. He doubted she'd refuse, so he'd rather not. There were dangers to having civilians, even those part of the crew, getting involved in a hunt. I can probably crack the code, the muscular female, leaning against the programming console, said. I familiarized myself with their lexicon on the way here. It's not all that different from Slirak or Turtirol, or even our own Keprak. It's going to be more figuring out the exact syntax than anything else. What are the dangers that they will detect what you're doing? It depends on how long I have, she replied. You don't rush hunting Pharmasans if you don't want to get gored. At this time, the clock is in weeks, 2 at a minimum. That's how long medical expects our engineer will take to regain consciousness. There will be more, but they won't know on how much until he's conscious. If I can have unrestricted access to this board, I'll have enough in 3 days to get in. You aren't getting unrestricted access, Patrick said before Gralgaran could agree to it. I'll allow you 3 shifts if you promise to sleep the 4th. The instant I learn you spent time with your friends, instead I'm pulling you off the hunt. Pulling you off the hunt. She looked at Gralgaran, hopefully, but he shook his head. While he had the power, as Alpha, he wasn't overriding his beta's decision. Batrix knew the people under his command, but not. Batrix knew the people under his command, not him. But he would talk with his beta about a lesser punishment. His team had the best hacker on the ship, and she was already familiar with Earther code. He couldn't afford for her to be taken off the hunt. I know he isn't a hunter, the copper-furred male said, but have you considered asking the quartermaster? I have, Gregoran said, and this is not to be discussed with him. I'm well aware the male has contacts none of us should even be able to find, but this hunt is too important to risk his greed. As much of an asset to the ship as he is, never forget he is Tahala. Yes, Alpha, they answered. How large is ventilation? Patrick asked. Zora has a hunter in her squad that is barely larger than a cub. We will keep breaking into the station for if I have to resort to demanding to be let on, and refused, he answered. And with listening to their comm and hacking into their system, at least we have a starting point. Have the betas answered you regarding any hunters, knowing others? Rarigar is the only one, Patrick said. None of the other hunters have a crew post that requires them interacting with other species. Which meant not only would he have to see if Leah was willing to help, but he needed to go through his comms officer's file to find 2 he could trust with this work, while Leah taught the language to 3 more hunters. Find 7 volunteers to learn Earther. Well, as Beto did that, Gregoran would add it to his office to go over every hunter's file to see who knew which language. If he couldn't find 8 of each, he'd have to arrange to stop at the station with a Kelsaran consular who could teach them. He shook himself before stepping out of the shower, then called up his reflection. His mane was too distinctive. He didn't want to be the ship's captain this evening. He wanted he wanted to dance the night away as another crew male. Those who had manes either let it grow long or, if their position needed it kept short, sheared it off. It was vanity that kept him from shearing it. He understood that, but he was fine with it. He gelled it before tying it back. This hid that it wasn't a full mane. Actually, no. This is going to be cynical. This hid that it wasn't a full mane. Then he called up the list of scents. He wanted something subtle and inviting. While he didn't want to shove it in others' males' nose his ulterior motive for dancing with them, he wanted them to be able to make a decision quickly once he verbalized his intent. His identity masked as well as it could be with what he was willing to do to his mane, and properly scented, he moved on to pants. Something on this side of sheer. He wouldn't expose himself for all to see, but as with the scent, he wasn't interested in hiding his intent. He clipped rings to his left ear, so light reflecting on them would draw attention to him. He added the crew identification bracelet to his wrist so he wouldn't have to worry about paying for his drinks, then considered chest decorations and dismissed them. Pants were needed outside quarters and the leisure alleys. Exposing his chest would be inappropriate if he was on duty, but as someone out for a good time, he flexed, and his muscles were one of his assets, so covering them wouldn't serve him tonight. The rhythm took him as soon as he stepped into the club. The percussion moving him along the other bodies, a sense of pleased exhaustion, outright exhaustion, and desire mixing with that of wines and juices. One of the club's server presented him a tray with a variety of glasses. The juices were identified with a gold band, while the alcohols a green one. He took one with a green band and passed his bracelet over the scanner, and the server moved on. He moved with the others who let the beat carry them, brushing against some when the scent was appealing, and others brushed against him. While never a guarantee, since those didn't exist in clubs like this, holding a glass was usually enough to keep someone from insisting. Those drinking were still in the process of switching from duty to off duty. Gralgaran simply liked to take the time to see and smell what was available. Once his glass was empty, he set it on one of the shelves attached to the column that peppered the club and joined a group of male and females dancing together. Now, when contact was made, he was pulled against the partner and they moved in sync. No, or not always, to the beat, before switching to someone else. When Gralgaran pulled a male to him, he turned them so their back was against his chest, so he could breathe in their neck as they moved. It wasn't foolproof, but over the years of using this technique, he'd found he had an easier time smelling how receptive to his intent other males were in this position. At times, female pulled him to them, and he danced with them. Occasionally, one made an offer, and he turned them down. As much as the scent he picked was designed to appeal to males, no one reacted exactly the same way to them, and he enjoyed the interest. He simply didn't see the pleasures. He simply didn't see the pleasures he was looking for this evening. He simply didn't seek the pleasures he was looking for this evening with females. That may need to be retweaked because, maybe we'll see. When he made his decision, the male was shorter, his head resting against Gralgaran's neck while they moved to a languid beat. He smelled willing, but to be certain, he nipped the male's neck. He felt the rumbled moan and smiled. He nuzzled the ear and whispered, "You want to go find a nook?" The male turned and rubbed his muzzle against Gralgaran. That was enough for him. They made it to the closest leisure alley by ways of stopping and nuzzling and rubbing muzzles and nipping at exposed body part. His partner's hunger was pungent well before they reached the alley, and he was out of his pants before they even reached the couch, grinding his hardness against Gralgaran's leg. At the couch, his own pants vanished, and he satisfied his own hunger to his partner's loud pleasure. Sound woke Gralgaran. Conversation, sound of electronics. Maybe a ballad was playing. He cracked an eye open, and a handful of people were walking through the alley. On the other side, light reflected off that room's black wall. Thought it was early for someone to watch a ballad. Someone, resting his head on Gralgaran's chest, made a pleased sound. "Hi," he said when the male looked up at him. The responding "hi" was stretched nearly as wide as the smile. His eyes moved further up before widening. He buried his head in Gralgaran's chest and muttered something. "What's wrong?" "I can't believe I had sex with the ship's captain." Confusion struck. Then he realized the gel, as well as the main band, wouldn't have survived their hectic sex. "If it's so shameful," Gralgaran said, grinning, "you're welcome to deny it to anyone who accuses you of it." "No!" The male looked at him, then his ears folded back as a couple walking by glanced in their direction. He relaxed. "No, it was good. I just never thought it would happen to me." "Now you'll be able to boast about it." "I wouldn't do it. You'll be amazed how many are going to want to you because of it." The male planted his shoulder in Gralgaran's stomach a little harshly and rested his head on his hand, narrowing his eyes. "You say that like I have trouble finding partners." "I say it as someone who believes that all baits should be used on the hunt. It's not because the herd is large that you shouldn't get as many of them as you're able to catch." The expression softened. "I like the saying." Gralgaran chuckled. "You're welcome to use it. It's been around since before we left Kelser." He rubbed his muzzle against the other males. "But while I am off duty today, a captain always needs to be ready, so I need to head back to my quarters. Can we meet up again?" "Sure." He set his identification bracelet to receive data and offered it. "I'm not crew." "What's your name then? And contact?" "Zizarel." He added the contact information. "Well, Zizarel, I'm Gralgaran. You simply have to ask to be connected to the captain. Even when I'm off duty, I answer to that. If you're ever unable to find a partner, let me know, and I'll help." I'd rather it be because I want to have sex with you again. Galgran licked Zizarel's nose back. Nose. That works too, but now I really need to go. My bladder's woken up. He entered Zizarel's information in his pad as soon as he was in his quarters, then took a long shower. He was brushing his mane when the door chime sounded. Grant access. It opened and closed. Be right there. He finished brushing and stepped out of the shower room, then onto the lounge where a stranger waited for him. The male looked him over appreciatively while Galgran got over his surprise enough to take in how his visitor was dressed. Ambassador? Then he needed to get over that surprise to continue. How can I help you? Queric will suffice, Captain. I am only an ambassador to other species, but I am here as part of my ambassadorial duties. Commander Jackson has asked me to fetch you because he has a solution to your reactor troubles. And this concludes Chapter 8 of The Captain's Heart. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is available on Ream Story. If you are looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.